It began as an ordinary voyage through familiar waters. The SS Marine Sulphur Queen, a 524-foot American tanker carrying molten sulfur, left Beaumont, Texas on February 2, 1963. Her destination, Norfolk, Virginia. Her crew, 39 experienced men. 4 days later, she vanished without a trace in the Florida Straits. No mayday, no distress call, no wreckage that could explain what happened. Only a few fragments of debris and questions that have remained unanswered for more than 60 years. What could make an entire 7,000-ton ship disappear on a clear day in one of the most heavily traveled waterways in the world? The Marine Sulphur Queen had started life as a T-2 tanker, one of hundreds built during World War II to supply fuel across the oceans. In 1960, she was converted to carry molten sulfur, a dangerous transformation. Large, cylindrical steel tanks were installed inside her hull to keep the sulfur at nearly 275 degrees Fahrenheit, 135 degrees Celsius. The conversion made the ship unique, but also controversial. Naval architects later questioned whether the structural modifications compromised her stability and strength. By early 1963, the Queen was a familiar sight in the Gulf of Mexico, hauling liquid sulfur from Texas refineries to the East Coast. Her crew was seasoned, engineers, navigators, and seamen who understood the risks of both the cargo and the sea. On the morning of February 2nd, the Marine Sulphur Queen departed Beaumont, Texas, loaded with 15,000 tons of molten sulfur. The weather was mild. Captain Benjamin Worcester, a veteran mariner, was in command. Her route would take her across the Gulf, through the Straits of Florida, and up the Atlantic toward Virginia, a routine passage. By February 4th, radio operators on land received the ship's last transmission, a standard weather report sent near Key West, Florida. Nothing indicated trouble. Then, silence. When she failed to arrive in Norfolk as scheduled, the Coast Guard launched one of the largest searches in U.S. maritime history. For 19 days, aircraft and ships scoured more than 300,000 square miles of ocean. They found life jackets, small debris, and an oil slick, but no hull, no survivors, and no bodies. A single life ring marked with the ship's name washed ashore in the Florida Keys. Some planks and insulation believed to be from the ship were found drifting miles apart, scattered as if the vessel had been torn apart suddenly and violently. The absence of wreckage puzzled investigators. A tanker that large couldn't simply vanish. Even an explosion would have left a floating field of debris. But the ocean was silent. The ship was gone. The U.S. Coast Guard and the Maritime Board conducted exhaustive inquiries. They examined maintenance logs, cargo data, and interviews from the shipyard that had converted her. The findings were unsettling. Engineers discovered that the conversion to a sulfur tanker had severely weakened her hull. The heat from the molten cargo caused constant expansion and contraction of the steel, producing structural fatigue. It was possible, perhaps even likely, that the Marine Sulphur Queen had broken apart mid-voyage. But there was more. Internal corrosion from sulfur gases, poor ventilation, and a known history of small fires in the tanks. One report described a pervasive odor of burning sulfur on previous trips. And yet there was no definitive evidence. The ocean had hidden its witness. Theories of the disappearance. Structural failure. Many experts believe the Queen suffered catastrophic structural failure. Her midsection may have buckled under stress, splitting the ship in two. The molten sulfur, heavier than seawater, would have poured out and hardened instantly on contact, pulling debris downward. Explosion. Another theory suggests a chemical explosion. Sulfur dust is highly combustible. If vapors accumulated in the tanks and ignited, perhaps from a spark or faulty valve, the blast could have disintegrated the ship in seconds. Survivors would have had no time to react, and radio equipment likely destroyed instantly. Fire at sea. Some fragments recovered from the ocean showed evidence of charring. Could a slow, uncontrollable fire have spread through the insulated cargo tanks, suffocating the crew before the vessel finally sank? Overheating and corrosion. The extreme heat of molten sulfur may have weakened the tank walls and caused internal fractures. Repeated voyages with such temperatures might have slowly eaten away at the steel until failure was inevitable. For the families of the 39 men, the disappearance was devastating. They received no remains, no grave, not even certainty. The Navy's telegrams used the word missing for months before finally declaring them lost at sea. Captain Worcester's wife, interviewed years later, said she never believed the ship exploded. She told reporters, "He was too careful. If something went wrong, he'd have sent a message." That haunting silence, no SOS, no flare, became the story's most chilling feature. The Coast Guard's final report in 1964 concluded that the probable cause was structural failure of unknown origin. But the wording left room for doubt. Why was there no radio call? Could an instantaneous catastrophe have occurred, leaving no response? And if the ship had broken apart, why wasn't more debris recovered? Decades later, retired Navy officers suggested that the molten sulfur itself may have played a sinister role. When released into seawater, it could have created a violent steam explosion, sending superheated gas through the hull. Such an event might have obliterated much of the ship without leaving significant floating wreckage. Yet the truth remains beyond reach, buried beneath thousands of feet of water in the Florida Straits. Despite modern sonar mapping, the Marine Sulphur Queen has never been found. Numerous expeditions have searched the area believed to be her last known position, but no wreck has ever been identified. Unlike other lost ships of her era, she remains a ghost, an unresolved case on maritime charts. Oceanographers studying the Gulf Stream have noted how quickly debris can scatter, carried by powerful currents into the Atlantic. If the ship did sink in a deep trench, her remains may now lie under silt, eroded beyond recognition. The Marine Sulphur Queen's disappearance prompted significant changes in maritime safety regulations. The Coast Guard banned similar single-hulled sulfur transport designs and required stricter inspection of converted tankers. But the ship's fate also symbolizes something deeper: the limits of human control at sea. Even in an age of radar and radio, the ocean retains its power to erase. To this day, maritime historians still revisit her story, the tanker that dissolved into the sea, leaving only a whisper of smoke and a handful of charred boards as testimony. The Marine Sulphur Queen is more than a mystery. It's a warning, etched in salt and silence, that the ocean never gives up all its secrets.